Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the US formally acknowledges that Niger's military staged a coup when they ousted President Mohamed Bazoum back in July. Also, millions of Liberians turn out for polls. President George Weah is hoping to hold out against 19 challengers and secure a second term. And for World Mental Health Day, as the spotlight is turned onto the hidden struggles so many bear, we head to Kenya, where the rising cost of living has added to the daily stress of millions. But first, the US has formally called the Nigerian military's July takeover of their country a coup. Washington had held off from the label until now because its own laws require an end to assistance to countries where coups are designated. The US is already moving to end a $442 million package meant to help improve roads and trade routes in Niger. Fraser Jackson brings us more from Washington.
Months after Nigerian President Bazoum was ousted, the US has officially declared what happened a coup. Now, the US was holding off this declaration as Niger was one of the few remaining partners that the US had in the Sahel region after similar coups in Mali and Burkina Faso in recent years. Now, the US ambassador is said to still be in Niger. They're working to address US staff concerns and also logistical issues that may arise. Now, the declaration comes with an automatic pause in several avenues of aid that the United States was giving to Niger. One of them was counter-terrorism assistance, as well as military training. As well as that, foreign assistance programs worth over $200 million will also be paused in light of this declaration. Now, the United States State Department said that any resumption of U.S. assistance will require action by the National Council for Safeguarding the Homeland to usher in democratic governance in a quick and credible time frame. Now, the military junta in charge of Niger said that could take place within 3 years. However, the president is still being detained and we don't know when those democratic reforms will happen.
Well, voting has wrapped up in Liberia's presidential election. Former footballing star George Weah is bidding for a second term in the top job and faced 19 rivals. Our Justice Baidu was in Monrovia for the polls.
The voter turnout in several polling stations, especially in Monrovia, the capital, has been huge. As early as 2 a.m., some people tell me that they had arrived in time to cast their ballot. Many of the people that I have been interacting with are young people who say that for them, the key issues in this election remain jobs, security, and a strong economy to support the infrastructural growth of the country.
We need a job for the youth, we need development, we need a lot of things, we need a lot of infrastructures to be built in our country.
I want a job facility and a good health facility also, yeah, and the security, and we want a stable peace.
The most important thing here is no matter who wins, peace is most important.
The Electoral Commission says it will start releasing certified figures from tomorrow. It has within 2 weeks to release a final result. To secure a first round win, a candidate needs to secure 50% of the vote.
Changing the funding capacity of global lenders would mean that they could better help developing countries address climate change and other challenges. Now, that's just one of the key issues on the agenda of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund as they hold their annual meeting. Now, that is in Morocco this year and is currently underway. Both the IMF and the World Bank said that they want Africa to have a third seat on their executive boards. Earlier, Catherine Patillo, the International Monetary Fund's Deputy Director for Africa, told me that returning the gathering to the continent for the first time in 50 years was a reflection of the value placed on its perspective.
The issue of a third African chair at our executive board to amplify the voice of African countries, that's an issue for our member countries to decide. As staff, we're hopeful that the members will agree to this third chair. It's being discussed now during these annual meetings. This would really recognize the importance of sub-Saharan Africa. It's a region with, 1.1 billion people, GDP of over $2 trillion, a young and growing population, abundant natural resources, immense entrepreneurial spirit, a continent which is really increasingly critical to help solve global challenges. Really, I mean, looking forward, there can't be a prosperous global economy without a prosperous Africa.
Now, from COVID to the fallout from the war in Ukraine to the mounting effects of climate change to the rash of coups that we've seen recently, Africa has faced some pretty big economic shocks over the last few years. One of the main outcomes of Tuesday was a breakdown of Africa's prospects of economic recovery. So if you could just give a bit of a sense of what the main takeaways are from that and how the IMF plans on responding.
So after 4 years of crises after crises, including the pandemic, now there are some tentative signs that the outlook in many African countries is improving. And while the region is very diverse, growth on the African continent is set to strengthen from 3.2% in 2023 to 3.8% next year. And importantly, that's contributing to that is rising private investment and consumption, and that's expected to lift growth in 2024 for more than 3/4 of the region's economies. So it's not just a few big economies, but it is getting more widespread. Some other indicators are in the right direction. Inflation is falling, public finances and debt levels are stabilizing in some countries. But it is too early to celebrate. In many cases, inflation is still too high. Governments' borrowing costs are elevated, and countries face what we have termed a funding squeeze. There are exchange rate pressures that are persisting. So what we really need is stronger, still, job-rich, inclusive growth, and that's needed to alleviate the scarring that happened, to increase per capita income and increase living standards. At these annual meetings, we want to acknowledge the really incredible work and an agency of the African authorities, which we at the fund support to our utmost, and support them then in addressing these really difficult challenges that they have to then take strong reforms to allow the region and its people to reach their full potential.
Catherine Petillo there from the IMF. Now, a new head of the International Organization for Migration has called for a rethink about populations on the move and to see the potential that migration has to boost economic development. Amy Pope's the first woman to head up the IOM and is headed to Ethiopia on her first official trip. That's where Clotilde Azar is. She brings us more.
Amy Pope's priority for her mandate is climate change, a major factor in migration. Over the past 10 years, more than 7 million people in sub-Saharan Africa alone have emigrated because of climate disasters, particularly floods and droughts. This includes Ethiopia. Here, conflict has also internally displaced around 4.4 million people. A 2-year conflict in Tigray officially ended last November, but fighting continues in the Amhara region. Pope stressed that supporting the well-being of migrants is key to policies that make a difference.
Coming home should be coming home to safety, coming home to family. And so first and foremost is how do we make sure that migrants receive the critical protections and humanitarian support as they're coming. And likewise, when we recognize what's happening in Sudan and the desperation of many people who are crossing, ensuring that people are able to cross into a safe environment. So that's the work we're doing on the ground everywhere. IOM has one of the largest presence of any UN organization here in Ethiopia. We're one of the few UN organizations that have a presence in every part of the country.
Pope emphasized the positive economic potential of immigration and wants to see more legal immigration options. She's also keen on the IMO's work getting more funding from development banks and the private sector, which generally benefits from more regulated migration.
Clotilde Ezard there for us. Now, the 10th of October marked World Mental Health Day. Even before the pressures caused by the pandemic, more than 160 million people across Africa were estimated to be living with some kind of mental health condition. And in Kenya, the rising cost of living has more recently ratcheted up the daily stress faced by millions. Clarice Fortuné with more.
A wave of protests hit Kenya these past months as anger over tax hikes and the cost of living spilled into the streets. Anger, frustration and fear, all having a deep impact on people's lives.
So some of the main causes that we have noted to have maybe contributed to mental health conditions or issues, we can talk of economic hardships right now in the country. So many people are trying so hard to, let's say, make a living. And in these times, depression kicks in and people don't have the control over their mental health.
The sleeplessness. I haven't slept for like 3 days now.
But for many like Joyce Mugure, who struggled for many years with bipolar disorder, it takes time to find the courage to ask for help.
I didn't know what I was going through. So all my life I've been feeling different. I've faced a lot of stigma and discrimination because most people around me didn't understand what I was going through. Nobody knew it was an illness. Until one day when I was very suicidal, I saw someone advocating for mental health online and I reached out to them.
The Psychiatric Disability Organization in Kenya estimates around 2 million people are living with mental health issues. The organization offers therapy sessions at moderate rates with services for people who can't afford the payments. If not handled, mental health issues can have devastating consequences. The World Health Organization estimates that Africa has the world's highest rates of suicide in the world. Breaking down taboos around admitting to suffering psychological distress is key to bringing the numbers down. Gladys Mwiti is a psychologist. She shares her recipe for good mental health.
Do not take it for granted when you are finding you cannot sleep, because insomnia is related to stress, and the stress then will lead you to depression. So make sure you sleep well, exercise, eat well, and then get support around yourself. Make sure you have 1 or 2 friends that you can run to at any time of night or day.
Wise words. That is, though, it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.